The cloud storage, Ojasvi, we sort of referred to that briefly. See, the thing is that you know that 20 years ago, there was no cloud storage. I'm not sure it'll be there 20 years from now. We move on to new things, right? So what happens is anything that is, there's a difference between storage and archiving. It's a one, we are comparing oranges and apples here. Cloud storage is fantastic for storage and dissemination, right? But that is not archiving. So what we are doing is archiving, which is 1,000 years from now, it will still be there. And you don't need any technology to read the stuff.
If you actually look at data that is stored on the cloud today, a vast majority of that is actually stored on tape. Because what happens is only the data that is used commonly you can afford to store it on magnetic media, because in magnetic media you have to do error correction and you have to constantly refresh it to make sure that the data doesn't go through bit rot. So everything that is actually not regularly accessible gets moved onto paper tape, which is actually worse than anything that we are talking about, right? Because that basically can get destroyed, and fires can get destroyed even with humidity and so on. So actually, because we are so used to cloud in the past 10 years, we think that cloud is somehow permanent, but it actually is not. Cloud is really meant to access data that is accessed very regularly. When I say regularly, we are talking about 5-year time horizons. Anything that's beyond that, even large companies, you will see most of their data moves on to tape storage, like AWS, Glacial Backup, and so on. And then your ability to retrieve that, and that's not archival grade by any means, and it can get destroyed very easily.
There is one problem in any digital storage. We refer to that as bit rot. And bit rot is basically, it's bit, B-I-T, rot, R-O-T. So what happens is that in any type of storage, sometimes there's a tendency for a 0 to become a 1 and a 1 to become a 0. That's referred to as bit rot. So that can actually change the character, right? It's not very high probability, it's a very low probability, but it can happen. Whereas in something like either a palm leaf or something written in a book or this new technology, that's not going to happen. A dot will not suddenly disappear from a palm leaf, right? So I think that when we are, it's not that this technology trumps cloud storage. It's two different things. Cloud storage is very good for storage next 5 years, 10 years, whatever. You may ask, why did we lose so many things that were on floppy disks? Because surely people could have done technology migration, right? And the answer to that is there is so much stored. Look at all the information that is stored in the cloud today. Can you imagine if you have to take all of that and transform it into brand new technology? So what do people work on? They work on those things that are important for them today. They don't work on things that will be important to them 1,000 years from now. Whereas the stuff that we are talking about is things that were there 1,000 years ago will be there 1,000 years from now, or should be there 1,000 years from now. So we're just ensuring that it will be there 1,000 years from now.
Namaste to all the viewers in today's session of Indic Talks organized by the Center for Indic Studies, Indus University, Ahmedabad. We bring to you a duo that has amalgamated the modern and the ancient to revive that which soon may be long lost. Despite a rich history of burnt libraries, several universities and museums still do not preserve the manuscripts as they should be. Today we have Dr. P.R. Mukund, Professor Emeritus in Engineering at the Rochester Institute of technology in USA. He is also a keen student of Vedic science, as he puts it humbly. He started an NGO called Tara Prakashana in 2006, which is focused on preservation and dissemination of Vedic knowledge. We also have with us Dr. Anand Gopalanji, who is the CEO and co-founder of Vayu Robotics, a Silicon Valley startup that is developing bio-inspired scalable technologies for robotics. Before founding Vayu, Dr. Gopalanji was the CEO of Velodyne Lidar, a sensor company that he took public in 2020. Apart from his role as a technologist and entrepreneur, Dr. Gopalanji is also an avid student of Adhyatma for over 2 decades under the guidance of Dr. P.R. Mukund. Dr. P.R. Mukund and Dr. Anand Gopalanji have pioneered a new technology for preserving ancient manuscripts. This technology brings to bear modern technologies in additive manufacturing to create an automated process for recreating our ancient palm leaf manuscripts in a 3D plastic equivalent that can withstand high temperatures, is moisture and degradation resistant, and can be preserved for hundreds of years. The plastic manuscripts can be visually read, similar to the original palm leaf equivalents, but can be created using the state-of-the-art 3D printers automatically. I request Dr. Anand Gopalanji and Professor Dr. P.R. Mukundji to take over from here to elaborate on this.
Thank you very much, Ojasvi. Good evening to any participant from Bharat, and good morning to any participant from US. I should mention that special good morning to Anand, because it's 5:30 in the morning for him. So he's in California. At least for me, it's 8:30 in the morning, but for him, it's 5:30 in the morning. So very happy to be here. And I want to thank you, Ojasvi, for organizing this session. At the outset, I want to clarify one thing, which is that this particular technology that we're going to talk about today, it's not a new technology. We did not invent that. It's an existing technology, and a lot of people have worked on it and used for many, many applications. What is new is the application, not the technology. So going back, actually, Anand, can you start the slides if you don't mind?
Yes.
Okay, so the thing is, when we talk about archiving, that word itself, we need to spend a little bit of time on that, because when we are talking about the Vedic knowledge, there are multiple aspects to archiving. The very first one is the fact that all the Vedas and Vedic knowledge was actually orally archived. You know, for tens of thousands of years, the archiving medium was the human being, not any outside medium, right? So the thing is that we know that there are people even to this day who have last names like Trivedi, Chaturvedi, Dvivedi, and so on, right? So what that meant was that somebody, one of their ancestors at some point, knew 2 Vedas if there were Dvivedis, and 3 Vedas, there were Trivedis, and so on. And the reason this is important, this is very important, by the way, and the reason it is important is because in the Veda, there are multiple aspects that provide the meaning. It's not just the words. See, we can take a stone tablet or a 3D printing machine or whatever, and we can archive the words. But the words are only something that conveys the meaning, right? So in the Vedas, there's also the nada, that is tone is important. That conveys meaning also. The tone or the nada conveys meaning. The chandas, that is the meter, conveys meaning. So when you put things down in words, you're losing both chandas and nada. But the words are there. Okay. So the thing is that preserving words is okay. It's better than not preserving anything. But the thing is that it's also equally important that for us to really preserve the Vedas and Vedic knowledge, the human beings preserve it. And in that guru to Shishya type of passing on, technology changes over time. Human beings also change over time. Uh, for example, when we talk about nada, and just think about it, right? There were people who could memorize and chant hundreds of thousands of shlokas, right? Hundreds of thousands. And they knew just like that. Now, that ability to do that, very slowly, as the technology became more and more, we started storing things outside rather than inside, right? So technology is good if it's used properly, but at the same time, I just want to start off by saying that no technology, I don't care what it is, nothing will be a substitute for the human medium for archiving. So having said that, the written word, in our part of the world, when I say our part of the world, for last 50 years, I've been in US, but my mind heart is in Bharat. And so when I say our part of the world, I'm talking about Bharatavarsha. But in that part of the world, long time ago, many thousands of years ago, 4, 5, 6,000 years ago, they started making stone tablets in the part of the country I come from, which is southern part, Bangalore. We call it, in Kannada, we call it Shasana, right? They may use different words in different languages, but it's basically stone tablets, and they would engrave on that. And it would be, you can find these things even to this day outside some ancient temples and so on. Now, the thing is that the advantage in these things is that, it stays there, rain or shine, nothing happens. It'll be there for thousands of years. But the disadvantage is that it's not easy to transport. It is not easy to make copies. So those are issues, right? And not just that, there's only so much you can put on a one stone tablet, right? So from that, we progressed over time to various things, metal plates, palm leaves, tree barks, and so on, right? Depending on which part of, like again, in the south along the coastal region, because there are a lot of palm trees, they were using palm leaves, dried palm leaves as the medium for storing things. So one of the earliest, at least I have come across, what I have seen is about 800 to 900 years old. That's the oldest one I have seen, right? But the thing is that that was prevalent until just a few hundred years ago, until paper came on the scene. And paper has been around for a while, but printing technology came on the scene. So you notice that every time we so-called progress in technology, it becomes smaller, it becomes easier to copy and transport. Like, for example, a palm leaf manuscript is much easier to, carry around than stone tablets, for example. And copying was done by what was called the Lipikara. That is, they would look at that and they would actually copy it. Literally by hand, they would copy it, right? When printing technology came on the scene, you could replicate things very easily. So you could make thousands of copies at one shot. And also, the paper was thinner. But you notice that stone tablet, for example, will survive a fire, it will survive rain, it'll survive all of those elements. When you look at like a palm leaf manuscript, for example, it's also pretty good in the sense that the very fact that we have 800, 900-year-old manuscripts proves that it was a good medium and a good technology, right? But at the same time, you can actually, if you have a fire or something like that, it can burn, and it can become brittle over time and so on. Excuse me. So it's not as good as the older technologies in terms of preservation. Keep going further, just 50, 60, 70 years ago, microfilm was a big deal. You know, where people were putting everything on microfiche, microfilm. And the thing is that it used photography. But the thing is, for you to read those things, see, up until this point, up until the palm leaves, you want to read it, you just, all you need is light, you know, you can read it. But microfilm was not like that because it was already reduced, right? So you need like a projector or some kind of magnification. So you needed illumination and magnification for us to be able to read what was on the microfilm. What we found is that there are, you know, hundreds of thousands of microfilms all over the place. If you go to the National Manuscript Mission in Delhi, or go to the IGNCA, Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, they got so many microfilms, right? But many of them, unfortunately, no matter where they are, over after 30, 40 years, they start degrading. And after some time, you lose that information. Go further down, you know, once the computing technology came on the scene, we had so many things. Some of you may be too young to remember this, but some of us have been around long enough to remember floppy disks and things like that. And the thing is, the fact of the matter is that today, for most of us, like this laptop I'm sitting in front of, it doesn't have a floppy disk drive. So, you know, even if you have floppy disks, there are no floppy disk drives, right? So the thing is that what happens when you go to such media is that after some time, with technology migration, it's not really archiving because it just cannot even be used. And there are other problems too, like we talk about cloud storage, for example. The thing about cloud storage is that, as wonderful as it is in the sense that we can have terabytes of data. But if you take an image, right, what happens is that when you store an image in the cloud, right, what the software will do, it will take little pieces of the image and store it in different places. So when you recall that, when you want to see the image, it will recall all these little pieces stored God knows where and bring it back together, and it will show it to you, right? Now, what is the guarantee that 200 years from now I'll be able to do that, or 100 years from now? The chances are almost zero that we can actually do that. So to sort of summarize this whole thing, in terms of archiving, something that has to be there for hundreds of years or thousands of years. You see, the thing is this, right? What we value in the marketplace, what is valued is something where it's needed only for 1 or 2 years. Like technology, people who understand technology are paid a lot of money, right? And there are two of us sitting right here who made a living doing that. But the thing is, the fact is that, you know, in my own field of electronics, we say the half-life is about 3 years, in the sense that anything I know in 3 years, half of it is worthless. But Vedic knowledge is not like that. This is permanent, right? So anything of a permanent nature, anything that we need to keep for thousands of years, if not hundreds, you know, those things have to be archived. When we talk about archiving that knowledge, we have to look at it with fresh eyes, not think of like cloud computing and things of that nature, right? So physical archiving is very, very important. Otherwise, even the words will be lost. I started out by saying that the sound, nada, and chandas is important, but even the words will be lost, right? So at least the written word we can keep. What would be good? I've been thinking about this for decades and I don't have a solution yet. Is that it would be nice if I can find a way where I can actually store sound permanently that doesn't depend upon computing technology. You know, like 1,000 years from now, if they can somehow listen to it, right? Then we can incorporate the chandas and the nada also into that thing. I don't have a solution yet. Maybe hopefully someday somebody smarter than me will figure it out. But at this time, we don't have that, right? So Anand, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the thing is that before I hand over to Anand to talk about 3D printing, I just want to say one thing, which is that a few years ago, when we started looking at these palm leaf manuscripts, we realized that the ink, just to let you know how they do it, if you take a palm leaf as the medium, they take a very sharp object and engrave into that thing. It's not like writing like with a pen or something. It's actually engraving, which is a good thing because then they fill it with ink. But even if the ink disappears, the good news is that the engraving is still present. That's a good part, right? So we have some technologies like, capturing, you capture the image on the palm leaf at multiple frequencies. We call it multispectral imaging. And once you do that, you just extracted the image. That's all you've done. When you talk about archiving, there are two types of archiving, okay, in a very broad sense. One type of archiving is archiving the original artifact itself. If I take a palm leaf that's 800 years old, I can prolong its life, right? But maybe I can do it 50 years, 100 years, but I cannot prolong it by 1,000 years, for example. So another type of archiving is to very faithfully getting the image that's in the physical image that's in the palm leaf, extracting that and archiving it in another medium that will last for a long time. Now that process requires, it's a three-step process. One is extracting the image. Again, I want to stress on that word faithfully, so because we don't want to lose any information or alter it in any way. And once you have extracted that, we have technologies for processing that. Just to give you one example, I was talking about the multispectral imaging. What happens is that when you take an image at multiple frequencies, it goes to different depths in that engraving, right? So when you actually capture those images at different frequencies, afterwards we can do processing by computationally taking all these images from infrared to ultraviolet, take 10 different things, and when we combine that, we get a beautiful image, even if you cannot read it at all because the ink is all gone. We can still do that. So that extraction is there, the processing of the image is there. Again, the processing has to be done in such a manner that it's very, very faithful to the original image. And the last step is transferring to a medium that will last for a very long time, right? So that's a process. So Anand, can you go back to the previous slide for just 1 second, please? No, go back one more. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So you notice that there's a thing there in the right-hand upper corner that says wafer fish. So what we did was in 2006, we came up with a similar thing as to what we are talking about today. There's existing semiconductor technologies where you can use metal on silicon wafer, and that the bonding between the silicon wafer and the metal is almost permanent. For all practical purposes, we can say permanent. 500 to 1,000 years, nothing will happen, okay? You can take it to high temperatures, nothing will happen. Moisture won't do anything to it. That's all fine. There are two problems with this. The first one is that it is reduced a lot. We used to reduce it 50 times. So in order for you to read it, you don't need any software, nothing. But you do need magnification and, of course, illumination. Without light, you cannot read it. But there's a second problem. And by the way, we came up with this application, this technology in 2006. And we produced a bunch of, we came up with that name called wafer fish. We have a patent on this also, by the way. And so there's some important things. Just to give you one example, the oldest Bhagavad Gita, written Bhagavad Gita manuscript is unfortunately not in Bharat, but it's in Oxford University. So after making 2-3 trips there, I was able to get the image. We put on a wafer fish, and I gave it, this was a few years ago. I don't remember the exact date, pre-COVID sometime. I gave it to the National Manuscript Mission. So fortunately in Delhi, we have a wafer fish that is the oldest Bhagavad Gita. For a long time, we didn't even have that. It was sitting in England, actually, right? So the thing is that the second problem with this wafer fish technology, because it's a semiconductor technology, you need a clean room to manufacture. And that whole manufacturing process is expensive. Because you see, when you look at computer chips and all that, the reason it is inexpensive is you take the same thing and you reproduce it billions or millions of times at least. That's what makes it cheap. But here, everything is unique, right? We are only making one or two pieces, but everything is unique. So it becomes very expensive. But we didn't know what to do all these years. And suddenly, recently, 1 or 2 years ago, suddenly thought, hey, why not use additive, what is normally called 3D printing, right? So why not use that? Because it's a technology that has been proven in the marketplace. The equipment, manufacturing, everything is available. So we thought, let's take that technology and use it for this application. And that's what it's all about. And so Dr. Gopalan, who is actually, I've known him for 20 years. He was my grad student. He got PhD with me many years ago. He's also continues to be my shishya. So I asked him, can you please take a look at this and work on this and, see how this works out. And so he spent considerable time and energy on this. And I'm happy to tell you that actually it works. And so we're going to be implementing this. We got a patent on this as well, by the way. By the way, if you wonder, why do you keep, we have no commercial interest in this, just to let you know. We don't make money or anything like that. We run a non-profit trust and we have zero interest in making money. That's not the point. The only reason we do this is that we don't want other people to turn the, because we do it with no expectations, without, expecting money and all that. We don't want somebody else to take this away and turn it into a commercial enterprise. We want it to be non-commercial, where knowledge is saved for the sake of saving it, not for any other purpose. That's the reason we get patents on this. But anybody who wants to do this, welcome to contact me, and I'm happy to share it with other people too, right? So we have no commercial interest in this. So I want to hand over to Anand and let him explain the details of this technology, and then I'll come back later and say a few words. Anand, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukund. Namaste to all the listeners. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to work on this under Dr. Mukund's guidance, and we have some very interesting technology that hopefully can take this preservation forward. So as Professor Mukund was saying, there are two halves effectively to the preservation archiving of manuscripts process. The first half is extracting the information that exists in three-dimensional form in these palm leaves, because they've all been engraved. And that's where we came up with this multispectral imaging method, which creates essentially a composite image using all the different layers that are there in the palm leaf. Now, the second half of this is, how do you take that image and put it in a medium that lasts for a long time, that is easy to use, that can be readily readable, and so on. Over the past, I would say, 2 decades, even though the idea of 3D printing has been around since the 70s, over the past couple of decades, 3D printing technology has come a long way, to the point where today 3D printing manufacturing methods, what are called additive manufacturing methods, are used in a variety of very high reliability and durability applications like aerospace and automotive, where you have very difficult requirements in terms of how long something needs to last. So these methods have come a long way since then. And the reason that this is an important tool for archiving is because of this idea that the information needs to be preserved in three-dimensional structure. If you look at how our ancients thought of the palm leaf technology, it's really unique in that it's not just a two-dimensional print on paper, as Dr. Mukund was saying, it's a three-dimensional engraving. And so that even if the ink itself degrades, the three-dimensional structure of the text is preserved in the manuscript. So the same idea we wanted to apply for any future preservation, where not only did we want to have just a two-dimensional text, but three-dimensional structure. And obviously, additive manufacturing methods are a really good tool for doing that. As you have seen more recently, not only have these methods become very widely used, they have come down significantly in cost, and they have increased significantly in accuracy, allowing us to do things that are very good for preserving these manuscripts. There are a variety of different materials actually today that can be used for 3D printing, all the way from very inexpensive things like plastics to very expensive things like metals and even biomaterials. Each of them have advantages and disadvantages, as everybody knows. For the purpose of preserving manuscripts, interestingly, we have realized that plastics are actually a really good material. And in a sense, this is taking the big disadvantage that plastics have and turning it into an advantage. All of us know that plastics have this big disadvantage, that is they're not biodegradable. So, we are all familiar with the fact that plastic bags and so on, when they're left in the environment, they don't degrade. But now we actually can turn that into an advantage for the purpose of archiving, because now we want something that is not biodegradable, that can actually last for several centuries. And plastics actually can provide that as a very big advantage for this. The other big advantage of plastics is actually cost. As I'll show you in a second, the process we have developed, the cost per leaf of this manuscript can be as low as 40-50 rupees or $50 or something like that. So because the cost of the material is very, very cheap and very inexpensive, and it's available everywhere. So for these reasons, plastic is a very good material. We also are looking at some other materials like nylon, which also has some really good properties. Broadly speaking, I'll talk about the advantages in a second, but plastic has very good advantages that make it a very promising material for what we are trying to do with manuscripts. There are many different types of plastics used in 3D printing. I won't go into the gory technical details here, but broadly speaking, you will see three very broadly used materials. Their acronyms are PLA, ABS, and PETG. And there's many different trade-offs. Broadly speaking, PLA is the most easy to use, but it's biodegradable and actually degrades over time. PETG is a new material that is actually the most strong, has very good tensile strength, but is also got a very high durability, fire resistance, and so on. So to give you a sense, these plastic manuscripts can withstand temperatures up to 200 degrees Celsius. You can also imbibe them with a resin that makes them moisture resistant as well as UV resistant. So one of the things is, if you leave a manuscript out in the sunlight, UV light can actually degrade the lifetime of these kinds of manuscripts. It happens with palm leaf, and it actually can even happen with plastic. But we can imbibe a resin into PETG that actually makes it UV resistant as well. So practically, unless it's exposed to fire, which is the one thing that plastic will degrade under, in all other conditions, this actually can last for centuries, similar to what palm leaves have done. And so the key question then becomes, how do you take this information that is existing in the palm leaf and transfer it into this new manuscript form? And obviously, as Professor Mukund said, there are tens of thousands of these kinds of manuscripts everywhere. And can we do this in an automated manner that is very reproducible and faithful, because you don't want to lose any information? And so that's what we'll describe in the coming few slides. So, so with PETG type of plastics, we think we have hit upon something that is very suitable for preserving manuscripts for long periods of time. As I said before, they're not biodegradable, which is actually in this case a plus. They're very resistant to a majority of environmental conditions, so they're very environmentally stable. And one of the big things about archiving, which doesn't happen for digitally stored media, is accessibility. So for anything that is digitally stored, you need a piece of software, you need a drive, you need all of these things to actually read and access the media, which actually makes it less suitable for archiving. So even though digital storage is a big part of what we do at Tara Prakashna as well, that is not archiving, because that is not the accessibility scale, that is very, very poor. So the advantage of what we have developed is it can directly be read. And in fact, there is even no miniaturization. So the palm leaf, effectively the plastic palm leaf, looks something like this. Essentially, it looks essentially like a plastic equivalent of what one of our palm leaves, ancient palm leaves, would look like. And effectively, you can read it like you would read any other medium. And that accessibility is actually a very important factor. It's
Anand,
also very versatile. Sorry.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry to do
Yes,
this,
sir, please.
but I just
Please,
want to
no, of
add
course.
something. I just want to add something to what you said, which is that you're talking about accessibility. The fact is that the digital domain, of course, gives instant access from anywhere in the world, right? But in this technology, the creating the digital thing is an intermediate process. It's part of the process. So there's nothing to prevent us. As a matter of fact, we do that already, right? So digital libraries. So for the short term, accessibility, we solve the problem by making these things available digitally also. It's just that that's not archiving, that's all for long term. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, yes, that's exactly correct, sir. And then also there is a tremendous amount of versatility. One of the things that we find is that even with palm leaf and leaf manuscripts, there are many different sizes and form factors that exist, and all of that can be supported very directly using this technology. And you can also scale it in dimension if you need to, and you can do that also in a completely automated fashion. And as I said, the big strength of this technology is the low cost. Basically already at this early stages, just with a handful of manuscripts that we have started working on, this is already at the cost of just tens of rupees per leaf because of the low cost of plastics, and this can be further reduced. And so it's a very, very cost efficient technology. And this is one of the things that we had overcome as being a drawback for the wafer fish, which was a little bit more and required more expensive equipment. And also this can be done in a very normal, non-clean room environment. It's basically can be done in an open lab setting or an open space. And so that's also a big advantage for this technology. So what I'll show you in the coming slides is just very quickly a snapshot of the process. And keep in mind, the process has a lot of finer details that I will not go through in terms of how we extract this information, but I'll just give you a sense of how this is done. As Professor Mukund just said, the first step is the digitization. So we do have a digital image, that is the image of the manuscript itself that we have extracted using our multispectral imaging system. As you can see, because it's coming from a palm leaf, this image has all sorts of, in addition to text, it has blemishes, it has noise, it has these kinds of things. So the first step is to actually extract the text, what is the actual text information from the background, and to actually remove the noise. And there are some algorithms that we use to do this, which are more sort of image processing or signal processing algorithms. And when you do that, essentially you pull out basically the text and you remove all the sort of noise and blemishes in the palm leaf, because this is what you want to preserve and save. This post-processed image with a text extraction is then actually converted into sort of a mathematical representation called a vector graphic representation. Essentially, this representation allows you to do a lot more mathematical operations on it in a very simple manner. So it's converted into this vector graphic representation, which represents essentially the entire text in the image. Once you do that, the most computationally intensive part is now to recreate the three-dimensional structure. Because remember, ultimately, we want to take it back into a three-dimensional structure that can be stored in this three-dimensional medium. And so there is some extensive sort of computation that that is done to actually recreate effectively a three-dimensional structure on top of this vector, as I described it. And again, we have developed a method of doing that. And you can see here, essentially, I'm showing a sort of three-dimensional view of this palm leaf, essentially with the three-dimensional structure of the text that has been recreated. This is generally the most computationally intensive piece, but we can still do this on basically a laptop type of computer. So it does not need like a big server or something to do it. And then once you do this, now comes the key part of transferring this into a format that a 3D printer can understand, but also more importantly, specifying how the 3D printer can recreate the structure. So so in the 3D printer has many different ways it can print, but in order to recreate the palm leaf in a manner that is actually can last for a long time, there are some very important parameters such as how much material you fill in the three-dimensional walls, what gaps you have, how do you deal with gaps between the substrate and this three-dimensional structure, and so on. I won't go into the details, but we have really spent a lot of time understanding and figuring out how these parameters need to be set so that when the 3D printer actually takes this information and then reproduces it, it creates effectively something that is like a palm leaf, can last for a long period of time. So this is the step of converting this into a 3D printer readable format. And then ultimately, as an output of all of this, this process, what you get is the same manuscript effectively now created in plastic form, which is basically preservable and readable.
I just want to say that this image that you're showing, we are making it so simple, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now, this is actually a revolution in terms of archiving. So you're looking at something that is going to, in a way, I hope, revolutionize the archiving of the Vedic knowledge, right? And this is the first time we are looking at that. We're actually looking at that, right? And I think it's in a way, I mean, I'm not trying to say anything great about any of us. We are ordinary people, but just from the knowledge perspective, I would like to use the word jnana, from the Vaidika jnana perspective. This is a revolution in a way. Like, just like imagine if you could go back in time when somebody, we don't know who, figured out that, hey, I can store these things on palm leaves, and the very first palm leaf was written. This somewhat like that. So I wanted us to appreciate the moment that this is something historic. That's all. Go ahead, Anand.
Thank you. So in the next slide, I'll just show you a video of this process that we have developed, and then I'll hand off to Dr. Mukund to tell us a little bit more about our activities. So this video just describes this flow that we have created to go from this image, as I said, which is derived from the multispectral system. And you will see sort of how we are able to extract the text. And the text is now independent of the background. It's completely, we have removed a lot of the noise in the text, and it's effectively converted into what we call a vector graphic format. And we are able to then, with computation, be able to create or recreate three-dimensional structure on top of this text. And so you can see effectively now this has become a three-dimensional view of the palm leaf, if you will, on a substrate. And there's specific parameters around the thickness of the substrate, the thickness of the text, which are very important to ensure reliable reproduction. These are some of the details of the process. And now you can see it has been converted into layers. And each of these layers is what will be printed by the 3D printer. And you can actually see now the 3D printer effectively creating this sort of a palm leaf or recreating this sort of the manuscript by printing it. And the thing is, you can you can optimize this process so that you can recreate these in minutes versus in hours. And then, as Professor Mukund said, the final result is this new reproduction of this manuscript that we have created here. So thank you very much for the opportunity to describe this, Professor Mukund, and I'll hand it off to you after this.
Thank you, Anand. Yeah, I just want to take a few minutes to share with people who are listening or might listen the recorded thing in the future also about our organization and many aspects of what we do. Tara Prakashna was actually started unofficially in 1997, which is basically my bedroom in my previous house. So there's no actually registered things. I would sit at night after the kids went to sleep and I would work on these things and using audio tapes and all that. So it started like that. But in 2007, actually, we registered it as a nonprofit trust in Bangalore. And the person you see sitting on the left, the older gentleman sitting there, he was actually my guru. His name is Dr. Bananjay Govindacharya, a very well-known Vedic scholar of recent times. And he is no longer with us. He passed away about 3 years ago. But that particular manuscript that we are working on at that time, that picture was taken, was the original works of Acharya Madhva, that is 800 years old, called Sarvamula Grantha. So this whole thing started with that. And we have come a long way. And the image that you see on the right-hand side is the multispectral imaging system. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know this for sure, but to the best of my knowledge, we have the only one in India, I think, but I'm not sure about that. There may be somebody else who has it. That's a very expensive piece of equipment. It costs about $100,000. And the thing is that it was developed by a company in California. And so it is very, very, very useful in the sense that just recently, in the last 100 years or so, many of the palm leaf manuscripts that were not readable, people have actually taken it and thrown it in the river, saying that we'll never be able to read it. What's the point in keeping it? So, and they didn't want it to go to the wrong hands or something. So they just went to Ganga Yamuna, went to the sacred rivers and just put it there. I wish they had not done that, because today we have the technology to extract those things. So, but anyway, what is lost is lost. But we do have plenty of stuff in our country. And so using this, what we have done in the last many years, I would say maybe 15, 16 years, something like that, we have actually, we've been able to preserve many thousands of manuscripts, many thousands. Approximately in the digital format, we have more than 3,000 manuscripts actually right now in the digital form. And one thing we have done is also just print it in book form. As you know, the Constitution of India is written on a very special paper, archival paper. That particular paper is acid-free and 100% cotton, and that's very expensive paper, by the way. And there's one company that makes that. And so we source paper from them, very expensive. Like each, if you want to make one book that contains one manuscript or so, we spent something like 1,500 rupees or something like that just on paper alone, just on the paper alone, right? So we're all self-driven. We're about 5 trustees, including Anand. Anand is a trustee in Tara Prakashna. And so we put our time, resources, money, energy because we are passionate about what we are doing. And we don't go around asking people for anything. We just do what we can. And so far we have about 1,500 manuscripts in that printed and bound format. Not just that, you cannot just keep books, right? You have to create catalogs. That's very important, very, very important. So we have scholars in our team who meticulously look at every single manuscript and create the metadata that says what it is, where it came from, who is the author, and all those things. It's very tedious work, but we create these catalogs so that for people doing research, they know what we have. Just keeping a bunch of things is no use, right? You have to know. It happens like you can go to some matha or some organization. There'll be thousands of these things. Like you can go to Oriental Research Library in Mysore, for example. You'll see hundreds of thousands. You go to Delhi, IGNC, you'll see hundreds of thousands. So for a researcher, it's important for him or her to be able to access a specific thing and do a search. And without catalog and real metadata, you cannot do that. So we spend this thankless job of creating the metadata and creating the catalogs of what we have. So we do that as well. And apart from that, we also have an electronic library we talked about this earlier, for easy access and so on. And I already told you about this oldest copy of the Bhagavad Gita. And can you go back to the previous slide, Anand, for a second? Yeah. So the picture you see in the middle, you notice that on the left-hand side, there's a building there. Not the most visible one in the middle. That's a temple. The building on the left-hand side that you see is our Tara Prakashna building. It's on the western coast of India, near Udupi. It's a place called Pajaka, which is the birthplace of Acharya Madhva. That's why it's there. And so that's a 52 square, that is 5,200 square building. 1 year ago, it was inaugurated. And so anybody can come and do research here. Anybody. It's open, free. We have no restrictions whatsoever. And already people have used that to create, I'm not sure about the number, something like 8 or 10 PhDs have come out from using the what we have in our library and so on. Okay, go to the next 2 slides, actually. Yeah. So the other thing we are doing is that we also realize that some of these things to the outside community. See, the problem is that once you come outside Bharat, right, the academics don't really know all the stuff that we have because there are narratives. There are narratives in the world that say all kinds of things, right? And we want to rectify those narratives. We don't want to create new narratives, but we want to rectify the narratives so that people know what the truth is. And the truth is that we have a lot of amazing knowledge. That's the truth. And so one of the things we are doing, we started a project. It's a 15-year project. We started about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where we are taking the original teachings of Acharya Madhva, and there are about 37 works, and each one of them we are creating a very, very detailed, well-researched work in English, a commentary, and critical study of each work. And we've already published 4 of them. So that's an ongoing thing. And the other thing also, some time ago, I came up with a few things. My personal, people I work with are young people, because today there are a lot of young people who are technically very well qualified, smart kids, and many of them, like Anand, for example, would come to me for graduate studies and research in engineering. And I realized that these people can do so much more. And again, he's a classic example of all the things he's accomplished in life. If only we, on top of the technical, modern, Western knowledge, we can superimpose our jnana on top of that. Um, I'll give you one simple example. I'm a professor, I talk too much, so I'll try to keep limit what I say. But in research, for example, in engineering research, I used to tell my students that the PhD work is actually done in one day, just in one day. But it takes about 5 years to get a PhD. So if it's done in one day, why does it take 5 years? Well, it takes about 2 years to get ready to see the truth. See, otherwise, when you see the truth, you don't even know you saw it, right? So the preparation takes 2 or 3 years. And once you see the truth, you need to verify that takes another 2 3 years. But truth is always seen, not derived. You cannot derive truth. You have to see the truth. And our knowledge, our jnana is important because it teaches us how to see the truth. That's why it's important. And the same people will become amazing technologists or scientists with hundreds of patents. And I can show you many people in my group like that, right? And the thing is, they're not Einsteins or some, well, I don't know about Einstein, but it's not that there's anything. The fact of the matter is they're superimposing our jnana on top of the what we call laukika jnana, that is worldly knowledge, right? So when you do that, you can do amazing things. So I run a bunch of workshops and things like that. For lack of a better phrase, I just call it science and spirituality, but done it for colleges. And right now we are running a course in Jain University in Bangalore, for example. We have run last 1 year, we did in Amity University in Noida, and we've done it a bunch of places. I've given workshops and all that in IIT, IISc, all kinds of places, talks, workshops, and so on. So that's another, that is on the, so we have preservation and we have dissemination, right? So today our main topic was preservation, but I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to let people know that we also do dissemination, right? Is that the last slide, Anand?
Yes.
Okay, so shut that thing off. So at this time, both Anand and I are happy to open the floor for discussion, questions, anything.
So such a technical genius and pure intents being put together to revolutionize the archiving process. It's just so hopeful to see something like this. And my question is just that I think it took 43 days for a post office in Bangalore to be made by 3D printing. So government, I think, is showing a lot of interest in 3D printing and the future of it. Do you see yourself maybe collaborating with government to maybe make these manuscripts more accessible in terms of first 3D printing them and then those 3D prints being accessible to people?
Yeah, I can answer that question. The thing is that, yeah, with all due respect to the government, the thing is, I have tried to work with several organizations in Delhi. And the thing is that there are many good people, very, very good people. I personally know some people who are very dedicated and who are very good, very knowledgeable also. But the thing is that inertia is something very hard to overcome. It takes a lot of energy to overcome inertia. And so the thing is that, we have limited time, right? I'm in a hurry. I'm in a hurry to do things. By the way, very soon I'll be 72 years old. So, I don't know how long I can do this, right? But then the good news, that's a bad news. The good news is that there are people like Anand, and he's not the only one. There are many other people like him in the group who will carry it forward. But the point is that, to answer your question directly, we have no problem collaborating with not just government, with anybody for that matter. We've already done that. Actually, we have done that. For example, some of the organizations that have the manuscripts, I can give you a couple of examples. There's one Matha in Udupi region called Sode Matha. And so we have collaborated with them since 2008 or 9 or something like that. So one of the things too is that people who own these things, they're very protective, rightly so, because they don't want all kinds of people coming and, messing with these things, right? So they're very, very protective. So to earn their trust takes a long time. So we work with these organizations, but today we work with many organizations very successfully. We have also, I didn't mention this, but recently in many of these things, we found some manuscripts that are up until now not published. People don't even know it exists. So we are taking things like that, and our scholars are doing research on that, and then we publish it as books. We've already done that. Matter of fact, on this, coming there on December 20th, and during this next trip, we're going to publish one more book. Last trip, we published one book. So we bring out things that have not been published so far. So collaboration is something we are very keen on, including the government. And but anybody who's listening from the government side, if there is somebody listening or anything, yes, we are always open to collaboration. The only thing is that long-term, governments are intertwined with politics, and we are academics, researchers, academics. We're not politicians, and so we work in a particular way. That is, we have a single-minded focus on getting the work done. That's all. We don't understand other things. And I don't say that in any negative way. It's just that that's who we are. And so if some interface can be brought, and there are some politicians who have done that. I can just mention one name. I guess it's okay to mention. There's a member of parliament from Mysore. His name is Pratap Simha. And he took me to ORI once, and initiated something. So the thing is that, yes, we are very open. And if there is anybody who is interested, definitely they can contact us and we can take it forward.
We have this one question from our viewer, Sunita Koparji, who says, are there tasks that can be accelerated through volunteering? So these collaborations don't necessarily have to be inter-organizational. How about as individuals? How can we be a part of Tara Prakashana?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, if you look at our organization, we are all volunteers. Anand and me, we don't get paid. Matter of fact, we put money into it. So volunteering is very welcome. Anybody. The only thing is, my experience, Ojasvi, is that sometimes people are very sincere. They are very sincere and they want to do something good. But the thing is, sustenance is very important, right? So
I think on the specific topic of this manuscript preservation, also, yes, there are areas where volunteers can be very helpful. Some of the technologies we are developing, require some human intervention to help remove certain artifacts and noise and so on. So yes, as we roll out these technologies, there are areas where people can volunteer and help with working on this data and things like that.
Yeah, my suggestion is that if anybody is interested, my thing is that it's not the amount of time. If somebody can volunteer even 2-3 hours, that's fine. And we have many volunteers like that. It's just, what I'm interested in, though, are people who have sustained commitment, not just interest. Interest is good, but they should have the passion. And because some of these tasks, by the way, are very, I don't want to say boring, but very meticulous work, right? So, it's nice to say, oh, I'll say Vedic knowledge and all that. But if you have to sit for 4 hours doing something very repetitive and meticulous, you may lose interest in that. And I've had volunteers like that who lost interest within 2 days, But definitely we welcome we definitely welcome volunteers, and they can contact, they can go to our website. It's taraprakashna.org, and they can contact, send a message to info@taraprakashna.org, and we'll contact them, and yes, they're welcome.
Another question that is coming from Om Prakash Ji, who is from Udupi actually. He's asking if this 3D printing method is only for palm leaf manuscript or other ancient artifacts as well. And is this 3D printing only for one side or both sides?
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, Om Prakash is in one of our people. I know if it's the same Om Prakash or somebody else, I don't know. But anyway, the answer is that no, it doesn't have to be just palm leaves. Just so that many of the old manuscripts we are dealing with happen to be palm leaves. And the thing is that right now we are looking at, just doing it on one side. We have not done double-sided. We can, but one point is that because of the low cost, like Anand said a little while ago, there's no necessity. See, it's only when you have very difficult or difficult to get, a piece of plastic, or it's very expensive, then you want to write on both sides. If it's very inexpensive, who cares, right? I mean, we can just write on one side. So that's not an issue. But we have not tried that. Is that right, Anand?
Yeah, I think generally the approach would be to do it only on one side, because the 3D printing method, it builds up the structure from the substrate itself. So generally what will happen is on one side you can create the text, but you really cannot flip it over and do it again, because it's not an actual engraving. You're actually creating that entire structure ground up. So generally, yes, one side is what we would do. And as Dr. Mukund said, cost is not prohibitive at all for us. So there is no reason for us to even try it on a second side. It's much easier to access it if it's one-sided.
Another question asked by one of our viewers is, are you translating the existing manuscript in current languages of India? I believe the manuscripts are available in old age Indian languages as well.
Yeah. Actually, if I may, I'd like to make a small correction to that. It's not old language. Most of these manuscripts are in Samskrita, which is the language. But perhaps the person who asked this question was maybe talking about the lipi, the script. Because Samskrita has no lipi of its own. Recently, we used Devanagari. But I think that particular manuscript that Anand showed, I was just looking at that. I think that is Nagari, either Nagari or Nandanagari, I'm not sure. But the thing is that there are many scripts, right? So the thing is that the number of people who can read these scripts is not that many, but there are many scripts. There's, depending on the, which part of the country. Like if you go to Kashmir side, many manuscripts are in Sharda script. You go more like Uttarakhand, Nepal side, there's Nevari, there's Bangla script, there's Tulu script, old Tulu script. So many scripts are there, right? So the thing is, our goal at the first level is to just save it. We don't want the manuscripts to go away. So we save it as it is. But having said that, like I said earlier, we are also taking specific, not all of them, we're taking specific manuscripts and doing some research and then producing it in a printed form in Devanagari. Translation, there is I think, a misconception that you can take anything and just translate to Kannada or Hindi or something like that. It's not that easy. It's easier said than done, right? So we cannot do everything. We don't do translation, but like I said, we do publish things. But the number of publications we can bring out, we work on hundreds, if not thousands of manuscripts in a year. But the actual books that we publish is maybe a dozen, right? Because it takes so much time, and also it requires scholarship to be able to not only read those scripts, that's one part of it, but you should have the knowledge to understand what is written, right? So you need scholarship at multiple levels, in script, in the language, and in the content also. So our publications, we do it, but we cannot do it for every manuscript.
If I may add one comment to that, Dr. Mukund.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that, as Dr. Mukund mentioned, there are many different lipis or scripts that these manuscripts are written in. They all map to the Samskrita language. And so one of the things that we are working on for the future is to use some more modern AI or artificial intelligence-based technologies to do this mapping. So Devanagari is a very well understood script, and there are many people who can read Devanagari. But some of these other scripts like Tulu Lipi or Sharda Lipi are not so well. We have some scholars in our group who can read some of these, but they're not very readily accessible by the larger academic community. So one of the things we are working on is, can we create an character recognition algorithm that can map from, say, Tulu Lipi to Devanagari as an example, making these manuscripts more broadly accessible. So please stay tuned. I mean, there's more work that we are doing in that for the future.
Yeah, we are working on that, and hopefully sometime in the near future, we can have another talk like this where we can talk about the AI-based tools for converting from an ancient lipi to a modern lipi.
Definitely, we can do that.
We are working on
But, oh, that would be great to have. Another question, actually, one of our viewers has is, can this technology help reduce cost of creating books in Braille?
Oh, wow.
What a wonderful application already.
I guess so. That's not our focus. Anand, I'll let you answer that one.
Yes, I think that's actually, it's a brilliant question, because I think the answer is yes, for sure, right? I mean, again, we had not thought of this as application, but you're absolutely right. The same technology is actually applicable for things like Braille, and cost of creating Braille books is very high because there is a lot of manual intervention that is needed. This technology would allow that to become a lot more automated. So the answer is yes. And again, we're happy to share the technology with anybody who wants to help out visually challenged people. But yes, it's a great question.
Just to add one comment, first off, I'm quite happy that you mentioned that the script that you had shown was actually Nagari script, because it was very hard for me to read. And I was ashamed for a moment that I'm not able to read it, despite being from
No.
Uttar Pradesh. But my question actually is that I think you did mention it as well. Why not use cloud storage? It would be easier to disseminate as well as archive these manuscripts. So what exactly makes 3D printing trump cloud storage?
The cloud storage, Ojasvi, we sort of referred to that briefly. See, the thing is that, you know that 20 years ago, there was no cloud storage. I'm not sure it'll be there 20 years from now. We move on to new things, right? So what happens is anything that is, there's a difference between storage and archiving. We are comparing oranges and apples here. Cloud storage is fantastic for storage and dissemination, right? But that is not archiving. So what we are doing is archiving, which is 1,000 years from now, it will still be there. And you don't need any technology to read the stuff. One other thing too, I should say, is that, I mean, this is sort of like a technical point, but the thing is that there is one problem in any digital storage. We refer to that as bit rot. And bit rot is basically, it's bit, B-I-T, rot, R-O-T. So what happens is that in any type of storage, sometimes there's a tendency for a 0 to become a 1 and a 1 to become a 0. That's referred as bit rot. So that can actually change the character, right? It's not very high probability. It's a very low probability, but it can happen. Whereas in something like either a palm leaf or something written in a book or this new technology, that's not going to happen. A dot will not suddenly disappear from a palm leaf, right? So I think that when we are, it's not that this technology trumps cloud storage. It's two different things. Cloud storage is very good for storage next 5 years, 10 years, whatever. You may ask, why did we lose so many things that were on floppy disks? Because surely people could have done technology migration, right? And the answer to that is there is so much stored. Look at all the information that is stored in the cloud today. Can you imagine if you have to take all of that and transform it into brand new technology? So what do people work on? They work on those things that are important for them today. They don't work on things that will be important to them 1,000 years from now. Whereas the stuff that we are talking about is things that were there 1,000 years ago will be there 1,000 years from now, or should be there 1,000 years from now. So we're just ensuring that it will be there 1,000 years from now.
Yeah, and again, if I may add one comment to that, if you actually look at data that is stored on the cloud today, a vast majority of that is actually stored on tape. Because what happens is only the data that is used commonly you can afford to store it on magnetic media, because in magnetic media, you have to do error correction and you have to constantly refresh it to make sure that the data doesn't go through bit rot. So everything that is actually not regularly accessible gets moved onto paper tape, which is actually worse than anything that we are talking about, right? Because that basically can get destroyed, and files can get destroyed even with humidity and so on. So actually, because we are so used to cloud in the past 10 years, we think that cloud is somehow permanent, but it actually is not. Cloud is really meant to access data that is accessed very regularly. When I say regularly, we are talking about 5-year time horizons. Anything that's beyond that, even large companies, you will see most of their data moves on to tape storage, like AWS, Glacial Backup, and so on. And then your ability to retrieve that, and that's not archival grade by any means, and can get destroyed very easily.
I think that brings us to the end of the question and answer session. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. P.R. Mukundji and Dr. Anand Gopalanji. It has been extremely enlightening and hope-inducing to know that this kind of revolution is being brought to the process of archiving our manuscripts, and the beautiful synergy of amalgamating modern technology with the pursuit of making sure that this revival war that is going on of Indic culture is not faced by the posterity to come. Thank you very much. We expect to have so many more talks like these with you. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Ojasvi. Also, thanks to Indus University for making this happen.